I'm a dental office IT manager's worst nightmare when it comes to security. I exploit your most valuable and most vulnerable asset, your patient data. I am ransomware. If I'm feeling lucky, I can just send a few emails hoping that a couple of your staff members will open my attachment, and you'd be surprised how many will. But folks are smarter than they used to be, so using a targeted approach works best. Social media sites are a honey pot of useful information, and with a couple of clicks, I have a better picture of your staff, their roles, and even their interest. I'll take my time to tailor an email and make it look like it's coming from one of Judy's coworkers and send it off to my unsuspecting victim. So when Judy at front desk clicks a promising link from her favorite dental hygienist, she lets me right in the front door. Systems locked down, data inaccessible, business is grinding to a halt. Your dental office is now one of thousands of dental practices to fall victim to my attack. And everyone's looking at you to clean up my mess. The fix is simple, really. Pay my ransom and get your patient data back. You want to think about it? Fine. You have 72 hours to pay up or kiss your patient data goodbye forever. Fact is, I don't even want your patient data. I just want you to want it badly enough to meet my demands. Dental practices like yours are low-hanging fruit to me, ripe to be picked. With thousands of ransomware sample at my disposal and millions of people like Judy in offices like yours, I simply can't resist. You can try and spend a little more time educating your staff members, but without proper security solutions in place, it's only a matter of time until I get in. What do you expect? I'm ransomware, it's my nature.
Hello and welcome to the Henry Schein TechCentral webinar. My name is Alan Crow and I'm a marketing manager for Henry Schein TechCentral. I'm joined today by Marc Laliberte from WatchGuard Technologies and our very own Bryan OLaughlin, Sales Zone Specialist for TechCentral. I'll introduce our presenters in a moment, but I want to thank them as well as all of you for taking the time to join us and learning more about how to protect your patient data. For those of you who are new to Henry Schein TechCentral, we are the leader in the dental industry for providing superior office technology solutions that are optimized and integrated for dental offices. Unlike other IT companies and retail outlets that simply sell IT solutions out of the box, TechCentral works with several manufacturers, like WatchGuard, to provide the right equipment that'll work in your dental environment. That way, you can focus on being a great dentist, and we can focus on making sure your technology works. We understand that the most important asset of your dental office is your patient data, and if you were to lose that data, your office could be dead in the water. That's why, during this webinar, our presenters will explain how dental practices are being affected by data theft, ransomware, and cybercrime on a daily basis, and how you can prevent cybercrime and be prepared for the inevitable attack, and know how to cut down on the discovery and recovery time after a breach. There are a handful of widgets at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to submit questions during the presentation using the webinar questions widget. Download more information in the resources box and share this webinar on social media. Also, be sure to fill out the survey on the right of your screen, which will help us provide the right content in the future. Our first speaker is Marc Laliberte and is an information security threat analyst at WatchGuard Technologies. And he is recognized as a thought leader in the IT security space. He specializes in networking security protocols and Internet of Things technologies. Marc's day-to-day responsibility include researching and reporting on the latest information security threats and trends. He has discovered and analyzed numerous security vulnerabilities in a variety of Internet of Things devices since joining the WatchGuard team in 2012. With speaking appearances and industry events and regular contributions to online IT, technology, and security publications, we're lucky to have him presenting to us today. Marc is a thought leader who provides insightful security guidance to all levels of IT personnel. Thank you for joining us today, Marc, and I'll turn the time over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Alan, for all of your kind words. So let's jump right in. So when talking about technical topics, I like to start with a quick definition to make sure that we're all on the same page. So if you are somehow unfamiliar with ransomware by now, when we say ransomware, we're talking about types of malware that restrict access to your computer and or the information on your computer while demanding that you pay a ransom to get them back. They are the modern day cyber extortion attacks, and they have become a major threat across all organizations, from the biggest of the big to the smallest of the small lately. Now, ransomware really started quite some time ago. The very first ransomware sample was found back in the end of the 1980s. A man named Dr. Joseph Pop handed out a floppy disk labeled as a AIDS information disk at a health convention. And as part of this disk, he had an end-user license agreement that said, "You are required to pay a licensing fee to the PC Cyber Corporation, and if you don't, there will be consequences." Now, when a user inserted this disk into their computer, the computer was automatically infected by what was called the AIDS Trojan. And then it would sit there and count the number of reboots on the computer. And once the computer was rebooted 90 times, the Trojan would encrypt all of the file names across that computer's main system drive, effectively rendering it unusable. And then it popped up a new licensing window saying, "Hey, you forgot to pay the PC Cyborg Corporation. You have to send us money now in the mail to this PO box in order to pay for your licensing fee." Now, ransomware has evolved quite a bit since then, and it really started taking off in the 2013 and 2014 years with variants like CryptoLocker and CryptoWall, which you may have heard of in the news. These were the first highly successful ransomware samples that earned their attackers tens of millions of dollars. And it's my belief that these ransomware attacks in 2013 and 14 that earned so much money really showed that it really showed to all attackers that there is money to be had in this cyber extortion, and ransomware exploded from there. There was another major evolution just last year with ransomware, with WannaCry, which is another attack you might have heard of. Now, previous ransomware samples throughout the years required some form of user interaction in order to infect the system, whether that be opening a malicious attachment attached to an email, or visiting a malicious link on a website that then took you to an exploit kit to automatically infect your system. WannaCry was way different last year in that it actually used exploits that were leaked from the NSA's hacking toolkit. You may have heard also on the news of a group called the Shadow Brokers who stole a bunch of zero-day vulnerabilities, as we call them, from the NSA. Well, the author of WannaCry rolled some of these vulnerabilities and exploits into their malware code so that it could spread automatically across the internet, infecting vulnerable systems without anyone having to do anything to launch the attack. It was pretty crazy, and people have started building on this with even more serious ransomware threats. Now, there's a few unique elements of ransomware that really define why it is such a serious issue now. And first of all, ransomware really flips the script. With traditional malware, the attackers try to steal your data and then sell it on the dark web for a profit. With ransomware, they no longer care how much your data is worth to other people. They're targeting how much that data is worth to you yourself. And by restricting access to it, they're assuming that your data is so important to your business that you're willing to pay quite a bit of money to get it back. Now, another issue with ransomware is that it has been commoditized. There are tools widely available on the dark web and other black markets to allow anyone to launch these attacks. And this includes something called ransomware as a service, where even low-skill or no-skill cyber criminals can basically rent a ransomware attack for hire. The people that run these ransomware as a service tools will host all of the infrastructure for payments and infection, and they'll just simply take a little slice off the top of the profits out of it. Now, another issue with ransomware is that targeted ransomware has arrived. And what I mean by this is there are ransomware samples that are highly complex and calculated, targeting specific businesses or groups of organizations. And I don't just mean people going after the big Fortune 500 companies. One of the major victims from these targeted attacks are healthcare facilities because the attackers realize that patient data is very profitable when it comes to locking up and restricting access to it. And then finally with ransomware, it really exploits the fact that people are the weakest link. Before WannaCry, and continuing after WannaCry, a lot of ransomware payloads require user interaction, and phishing emails that are highly convincing are a great way to convince people into launching these attacks and infecting their own systems. Now, ransomware has really taken off in the news as well, and one of the biggest victims for most of these attacks are healthcare facilities like hospitals and independent offices. The attackers realize that the criticality of patient data means that healthcare professionals are much more likely to pay the ransom, especially if their backups are either unusable, unavailable, or in the worst cases, non-existent. Now, the ransomware attacks that you hear about in the news are really just the tip of the iceberg. For every major hospital taken down by ransomware, hundreds of smaller offices like dentistries fall victim to it as well. And just because you're smaller doesn't mean that damages are smaller. In fact, they're often proportionally much more damaging to small and medium businesses than large ones because they simply don't lack the tools or expertise to reliably clean up after the fact. Now, we've got a quick polling question here that I want to put out, and it's how many of you have been the victim of a ransomware attack sometime in the past? Over the next few slides, we'll go over some statistics for the industry as a whole, but I really want to know about your personal experiences with ransomware. And this could be both at the workplace or even at home, because with most modern ransomware, it can actually spread across the network, which means if you infect maybe your work laptop at home and then bring it back into the office, it could suddenly spread to the rest of your network and bring your entire company down to its knees. So we'll give this a few more minutes or a few more seconds, and then we'll move on to the results. And Alan, whenever you think we're ready, you can go ahead and push this one through. All right, so it looks like only around 12% of you have been the victim of a ransomware attack, and even more frightening, 20% of you don't know if you've been the victim. And really, I would go so far as to say that a lot of you are quite lucky, or you have very knowledgeable employees already and staff members knowing how to avoid becoming a victim, because this is not the normal trend that we see across the industry. Now, when it comes to some stats about ransomware attacks, the average cost to clean up for a small or medium business is right around $99,000. And this doesn't mean just the ransom payment itself. This is the cost of cleaning up after the mess, bringing in specialized IT folk to try and get your systems back online, and even the reputation hit that you suffer when people find out, your customers find out that you've been the victim of a ransomware attack. Now also, 67% of small and medium businesses that were hit by ransomware suffered either a complete or at least partial loss of their corporate data, which is terrifying. Imagine coming into work one day and realizing that you have now lost access to all of your patient history. That could be the final screw that shuts your doors permanently. Now, also 34% of small and medium businesses admitted to paying the ransom in order to try and get their data back. And while that might sound like a good idea under the circumstances, the problem is paying the ransom does not guarantee that you will get your data back. All it really guarantees is that these attackers now have additional funding and incentive to launch further attacks, potentially even against you again, because now they know that you're good for your money. And then furthermore, 43% of spear phishing attacks, which are the primary mode of delivery for ransomware, were aimed at businesses with 250 or fewer employees, and this is rising year after year. So I hinted at this in the last slide, but how does ransomware typically get in? Well, we found that 40% of ransomware is delivered via malicious email attachments. And these are usually quite convincing, especially in the context. Imagine if, let's say, your receptionist received a message claiming to have attached an image of a patient's insurance card. Well, it's possible that that attachment isn't actually the insurance card. Maybe it's a dropper file that'll go and grab ransomware. And if you're not paying enough attention to the email, you could fall victim to this attack quite easily, and suddenly you are now infected with ransomware. And while we're still waiting on the numbers for last year, in 2016, ransomware delivered via email jumped 6,000% over the course of the year, which is just an insane climb in terms of volume of ransomware sent via email. Now we have another little couple of questions here that I'd like you to answer via the Q&A. And it's, if you have been the victim of a ransomware attack, I really want to hear about your experiences when it came to the attack. Now, as we mentioned earlier, 67% of SMBs suffered a complete or partial loss of their data, which is quite frightening. And then another 34% admitted to paying the ransom to try and get their data back. Now, the good news is that 42% of the people who didn't pay the ransom cited that a full and accurate backup was the reason that they were protected. And then another stat, half of all SMBs that were affected by ransomware were actually impacted multiple times within the same year. And this could be because they paid the ransom, which meant attackers now had them on a list of people to pay ransoms, or it could be they still lacked the proper training and technical tools in place to protect them in the future. So we'll watch the Q&A, and I'll point out a few stories if anyone's willing to share their experiences a little later. So here's where we get into a bit of the technical details about ransomware and why it's become such a massive threat to organizations big and small. One of the things that most ransomware payloads do really well is they're great at hiding themselves until it's way too late. Now, most ransomware samples, once they've executed on a system, they have to call back home to something called a command and control server, which is basically a remote server that tells them what to do. Maybe it gives them the encryption key to encrypt all your data, or it tells it further instructions to move across the network. Now, traditionally, these command and control connections have been in the clear, which means some security solutions could simply peek inside the connection and see what's going on. Modern ransomware encrypts their connections to command and control servers to hide them from most security tools. Another thing these ransomware samples do is use something called shadow domains. Now, you might be familiar with most websites. A domain name for Google would be like www.google.com. And Google probably registered that domain name a decade ago. A lot of these malware payloads use very short-lived domain names that they only register for a few minutes or a few hours, which makes it very difficult for reputation-based tools to identify malicious domains and block the connections. Another thing malware payloads or ransomware payloads use is something called packing, which in the simplest way means that they're changing their code to hide from traditional antivirus systems. They use another thing called polymorphic behavior, which means they are changing their code in real time as they are executing to further hide from traditional antivirus systems. They also have the ability to modify how your computer looks up domain names for connections to help hide their connections. And they've started adding sandbox avoidance techniques, which means they're hiding from the more advanced malware detection tools if they don't know where to look. And this all sounds pretty technical, I bet, and this is why you really need a technical person to help you out in preventing these ransomware attacks. Now, ransomware does share a few common behaviors from sample to sample to help identify them as opposed to other malware payloads. First off, they have a lot of data entropy, and what this means is ransomware goes through your system and tries to encrypt every single file. So this means if we're watching a process go through and touch every single file on your computer, we can get a good idea that this is probably ransomware and hopefully stop it before it's too late. They also have a lot of background activities, so they try and gain persistence on your computer. They start spooling up and setting up encryption runtimes. These are other red flags that we can look at to stop these ransomware attacks before your files become all encrypted. A lot of ransomware tools, such as the ones that WatchGuard uses, implement these things called honeypot files, which are basically hidden files that look real but are actually fake that no real human will ever find or open. So if we start seeing some application or process touching these files, it's another red flag that, hey, these shouldn't be messed with. Something is probably fishy going on here. And then when we talk about modal dialogues, with most malware that you might be familiar with from the past, they don't really tend to let you know that they're there. They try and lie hidden while they siphon off your data and exfiltrate it out of your network. Ransomware, on the other hand, pops up dialogues to say, hey, I've infected your system. Pay me this money or all your files are gone. And this is just another red flag that we can raise within the ransomware's code to identify when it is potentially ransomware. So that all was probably a bit frightening. Right about now is usually where I insert a slide with a picture of a kitten on it. But since we don't have that, we can go ahead and jump right into the defensive techniques on how to keep your network safe. And it's really a three-step approach. And it starts with education, knowing how to stop an attack or spot an attack, and then the actual tools for protection, which are the technical controls and policies in place to prevent you from being a victim. But as I hate to admit it, working in network security, no protection is 100% perfect, which means you do need a recovery process in place to ensure that you can continue remaining in business in the event of the worst. So with education, you really need to start out with security awareness training for your employees and your staff to be on the lookout for these attacks. Ransomware really preys on the fact that employees are the weakest link. And if it can trick someone into opening a malicious attachment for an email, it's way too late at that point. One thing I like to recommend is actually using some of these tools and services to send phishing emails to your own employees and staff. There's a lot of platforms out there that allow you to do this quite easily and then provide educational tools on top of it in the event that any of your employees fail the phishing test. And this is really a great opportunity for you and your staff to engage with IT services and IT professionals to ensure that everyone is educated properly on how to stop the attacks. Now, when it comes to prevention, ransomware absolutely requires what we call a layered defense. No single layer is going to stop everything, so you need multiple layers of protection in order to ensure that you can stop all attacks. This goes from basic anti-spam to prevent phishing emails and basic phishing emails from making it into your network. Traditional antivirus still has a place in here because it's really good at catching already known malware samples. Advanced malware sandboxing fills in what antivirus misses. And then intrusion prevention systems can help stop the exploits like we see with WannaCry from automatically spreading more ransomware. URL filtering can help you and your staff from accidentally going to a malicious website. And the same goes for reputation-based protections, where we identify when a web destination is malicious and prevent that attack or that connection from even succeeding. And then, as I mentioned, unfortunately, no defense is 100% foolproof. Maybe one of your employees takes home a laptop or a tablet to finish up some work and then brings it back into the office. Well, while they're at home, their perimeter defense may not be as hardened as your workplace. Maybe they get infected there and suddenly bring it back into the office. This means you really need plans in place for recovery in the event of the worst. And number one in this is a tested and working backup solution. And it's not enough to keep it just locally. There's a reason that HIPAA laws require off-site backups. It's because a lot of ransomware payloads specifically have the ability to locate and encrypt local backups. Now, cloud solutions and off-premises solutions are the best option here because these malware payloads typically can't jump to a cloud-based service. But let's say you don't have a backup in place. You should still hang on to your encrypted files because security professionals are always trying to find flaws in ransomware payloads and create decryption tools. So there's the chance that down the line, one of these tools will become available to decrypt your files and restore access to them even without paying that actual ransom payment. So With all the scary stuff out of the way, I'll hand it back to Alan to introduce our next presenter.
Thank you, Mark. That information was great. We now have the opportunity to hear from Bryan OLaughlin, who's been with Henry Schein since 2007. First as a technology sales specialist, then a digital technology specialist, and now as a zone sales specialist. He has been involved in the dental industry for over 18 years and has a wealth of knowledge that has made him very valuable as an asset to dental offices that are looking for ways to increase their protection in their practice. Bryan, I'll turn it over to you now.
All right, thank you, Alan. So all the things that you've heard, we at Henry Schein TechCentral, we have a lot of resources to educate you, and then also to help us help you protect yourself with all of those kinds of things. And if you would like to learn more about ransomware and how to mitigate the effects of it, TechCentral has a list of different resources on the website listed on this slide. It's hstechcentral.com/ransomware. It's full of articles, ebooks, white papers, and then also videos. And feel free to visit that site anytime. So, although you've been, going these many years thinking that you are protected, and maybe you are, but you also may have be very tech savvy, but the thing is, your expertise is dentistry, and that's why you need a trusted advisor to provide dental IT support for your hardware and software to better help you protect your practice. And TechCentral works with several technology manufacturers like WatchGuard to create a protected practice solution, which is a suite of tools and best practices that helps create a defense for your practice from security threats. One important piece of that protected practice solution is the WatchGuard all-in-one network security solution that provides protection while slashing the time and cost associated with managing multiple single-point security products. So with that, we have the security capabilities, and they work with each other for a holistic, comprehensive approach to network protection. Another big piece of this whole situation is the recovery. What happens if you get hit by one of these cyber attacks, malware, ransomware, things like that? But the big thing is the loss of patient records, financial and accounting information, payroll and inventory data, and this not only puts your practice, in a position of security and confidential breach, but the patient information is also at risk, and it threatens the viability of your practice you've worked so hard to build. Another important product and solution of this protected practice is having a redundant solution, having redundant copies of your valuable data in two protected locations, storing both data and on-site in the cloud as it measures of security in your information, and provides easy access for data recovery in the event of an issue. So with that, you may be saying, you know what, I'm good. My practice is protected. Or you might be sitting there thinking, well, oh my gosh, what's going on? What have I been hit already? How is everything going? I think I have a good backup. I think I have a secure network. But what we can do for you is to provide a no obligation technology assessment of your entire network. We'll run a series of tests and which pulls information, and it basically creates a health report of your networks and security, and also your server, the different computers you have on your network. We'll also test for the speed that your network's running at. Some of the things that may not be related to security, we'll also provide you that information. But the big things like your Wi-Fi being secure, your backup being complete and actually happening. And then also things that might be related to how old your equipment is and things that you might be thinking about purchasing in the future, and making sure that your computers and your network will be able to handle that. And so with that, we also provide a backup solution. It's a hybrid backup solution, and what it does is it stores the data on site, and it also stores your data in the cloud, and it's encrypted and it's secure. And the big thing to that is that it's monitored and reports are provided to you on an ongoing basis. There's also other support options that we have starting at $129 per month, which include unlimited support, monitoring of your server, and then also on-site service there in your office. And so if you're interested in any of the offerings that we have, or especially doing the assessment there in your office, feel free to visit this site. Again, it's hstechcentral.com/ransombear, where those resources are. But also, if you do the /assessment, then you can put in to get an assessment done in your office. Thank you very much. I'll turn the time over to you, Alan.
Well, I want to thank Bryan as well as Marc for providing this valuable information that can help us prevent data loss. We'll now turn our attention to some of the questions that have been coming in during the presentation. If you have a question that you need answered, please enter it into the webinar questions widget, and we'll try to get to as many of those as we can. Those that we aren't able to get to, we'll go ahead and send out an email afterwards answering those questions. But there have been several questions that have come in, so I'm just going to kind of go through those. One question that has come through says, as a general rule with phishing, are you still required to click on something to become vulnerable? I'm going to let Marc answer that one.
Yeah, sure. So as a general rule with phishing, there aren't many exploits that can automatically infect you through an email message simply by opening it. There is typically some user interaction that's required. But the problem is attackers are really good at what's called social engineering, which is the art of tricking their victims into doing something that is against their best interests. We see the bread and butter example of this is disguising attachments as resumes or shipping confirmation or bills of sale or something along those lines. And the attackers can hide their payload in a way where it is a legitimate document, but once you open that attachment, that's when the automatic infection happens. And it doesn't even have to be an attachment. They can use web links as well to link you back to somewhere to maybe like reset your password, might be another social engineering attack. And those sites host the exploit kits that automatically find vulnerabilities in your computer and exploit them to deliver the ransomware. So I guess to wrap that up, you do still typically require some sort of interaction, but it usually only takes a single click to infect your system.
Awesome. Thank you, Marc. Appreciate that. Another question that's come in is, what if my internet goes down? Can I access my backup files? Bryan, why don't you field that question?
Yeah, absolutely. And the answer is yes. All files and backups are stored locally on the gateway. So even if your internet connection is out, you should be able to restore those files. And then conversely, if the gateway becomes unavailable, your files and your backups can be accessed through the cloud in a few different ways, including through the web browser.
Awesome. Another question that's come in is, wouldn't it be easier or cheaper just to pay the ransom to get my data back? Marc, can you answer that one?
I can, and I understand why this is a temptation for a lot of organizations because, I mean, they're just asking for a couple $100 in most cases. Why can't I just pay that and get it all back? But you have to remember that you are dealing with cyber criminals by definition, and they cannot be trusted. And I can point out numerous examples where paying the ransom does not guarantee that you get your files back. In fact, in some cases, some of these ransomware payloads, like NotPetya, like we saw last year, actually have no mechanisms in place for restoring access to your files, even if you pay them. So all you're guaranteeing when you pay the ransom is that you're giving them more money and more reason to attack you and others again.
Perfect. Thank you. Another question that's come in is, why do I need a local backup if my files are on the cloud? Why don't we have Bryan answer that one?
Hey, absolutely. And the reason why you want to have that locally is because it's, first off, it has the faster recovery times in the event if there's data loss from accidentally deleting files or corrupted data, like we've been talking about. And additionally, the appliance there on site provides an extra layer of protection in the event if you do have an internet outage. So yes, your files will still be available locally on that device. The on-site backup does enable, just one more quick question. Or quick point is the on-site backup does enable the hybrid approach that that only the cloud backup solution can offer. And like I mentioned in an earlier slide, that we offer the benefit of on-site and cloud backup solution.
Thanks, Bryan. Another question that came in for Mark. I have a lot of protection. Is it still possible to get malware and ransomware?
Unfortunately, it is. And this really comes down to the fact that people are the weakest link in all of these defenses we put in. You could have the best WatchGuard firewall in place on your perimeter, but if you don't have any host-based protections and one of your staff members takes something home and infects it there and brings it in, they've bypassed all of your technical protections. The issue is that employees are really good at circumventing the protections and policies you put in place, whether willingly or unwillingly, which means attackers know how to exploit this to still infect your systems even if you have most of your layers of defense in place.
Thank you. Another question, my staff doesn't know computers very well, and I don't really trust them to oversee backing up and porting data. What should I do? Bryan, why don't you answer that question?
Yeah. So there's a lot to know if the backup is or isn't performing correctly. And with technology being so much more advanced than it used to be, it's not just backing up a drive or a file and putting it on an external drive. So there's a lot more that's entailed with your practice management, accounting records, patient images, different things like that. And so, with this hybrid, on-site and hybrid solution, we at TechCentral offer those tools to protect that. And the part of the monitoring and providing your reports that show that it's actually being backed up. And then the proper implementation, training, and understanding, how everything works is a big piece to that.
Great. Another question came in that we're going to give to Mark. It says, why won't my antivirus software protect me from these threats?
So this actually is a very interesting topic to talk about. Even traditional antivirus vendors recognized as far back as 2014 that antivirus is dead, is the famous headline they said. So the problem is that most modern malware, especially ransomware, has ways to hide from these traditional, what we call signature-based detection tools that rely on looking at parts of the code to identify what might be malicious. In fact, at WatchGuard Threat Labs, we try and track a number that we call the zero-day malware number, which tracks the percentage of malware that would bypass these traditional antivirus solutions. And off the top of my head, I can remember that February of this year, 45% of all of the malware that we saw would have bypassed traditional antivirus, the things like McAfee or Norton that you might be used to installing on your computer. So if you're relying on just those, last month you missed 45% of all malware attacks. And if even one of those is ransomware, you are suddenly in huge trouble.
Awesome. Thank you for answering that. Another question that's come in, and we'll give this one to Bryan. It says, how can I justify the cost of the investment in these tools? Bryan?
Yeah, so if you do end up with ransomware or losing your patient data files, the legal fees remediation costs, restitution, fines, and just the real negative media exposure that comes from data loss can have a lasting impact on your business, compared to the cost and peace of mind knowing that your data is protected and that you have decreased the possibility of stolen or loss of patient health information.
Great. Another question that's come in is, so do you still recommend antivirus protection if you have a WatchGuard router? Mark, why don't you field that one?
Absolutely. So this goes back to those multiple layers of defense that I was talking about. Just because you have your perimeter covered doesn't mean that you can ignore your endpoint hosts. So traditional antivirus still has a place in your network defenses. It's just it's not enough on its own. Traditional antivirus is still really good and efficient at catching the day-to-day malware and ransomware samples that you'll see, but it's not very good at catching the more advanced ones that attackers are starting to use now too. So it's another layer that you still need, but you want to make sure that you have more than just that in place to keep you protected.
Great. Another question is, does ransomware hide in your daily backup, or is it instantaneously activated? Mark, can you answer that one?
Sure, and it really depends on the different samples. Some ransomware payloads can wait for a bit of time before it actually starts encrypting your data. This is one of those common sandbox avoidance techniques that I mentioned, but it still requires access to your data in order to encrypt it. So local data, it could encrypt it locally, but then your offsite backups can be used to restore access to it. It can't typically jump the gap to those offsite backups. So until your data is encrypted, your backups are still safe, and you'll still have all of your data available. And then once it's become encrypted, you will still have your offsite backups to help restore access to your critical data. Hope that answered the question.
Great, I think that was great. Another question is, and this one's for Mark as well, what is the most important thing I can do to protect myself from viruses and ransomware?
And that's a good question, and it's really a two-pronged approach is what I recommend. First, you need a defense in-depth strategy like I've been harping on the whole time. And this is where WatchGuard and TechCentral come into the picture with our security appliances and security expertise from their techs. And this involves deploying the policies and actual technical tools to help prevent you from the attacks. But as I've mentioned, technical tools aren't enough because your employees are the weakest link, which means you also need to invest in security and compliance training for all of your staff and employees. And there are tons of resources out there that can help you with this training, including ones that let you fish your own employees to ensure that they're up to date on the latest anti-phishing strategies and they know how to stop these attacks before they even become a problem.
Great. Another question that's come through, and I'll give this one to Bryan. It says, how often should I do hardware backups or cloud backups? So
you definitely want the hardware backup. If you have an on-site solution right now, you definitely want to have a daily backup. You want to have a daily backup that you're being able to run and then take that backup off-site. That's the very, very minimum. With that, you do have the data. As long as you know you're getting everything, that's at least you're getting it done. The big solution is to have a device on site that's doing consistent backups throughout the day, not just at the end of the day and then it sends it to the cloud. These are incremental backups. What that means is that if you were going through half the day and then you get back from lunch and then you see that somehow a threat came through and that you have either ransomware or some kind of virus or whatnot, we can then work with you on getting that incremental backup so you only lose a part of the day. And so the incremental ongoing daily backup and then having it pushed to the cloud at the same time is the best solution. And it being the fact that it's encrypted, you definitely want to have, even the drive that you take off site, you want to make sure that that's encrypted as well. So if someone somehow something happened where someone took that drive, or some people have a USB drive because they don't have a lot of data or they don't think they have a lot of data. Those can get lost in the wrong hands, and if they are encrypted, you know, it's still something you need to report, but the people who have it are not going to be able to get to that data. And so just the on-site device that's encrypted and the cloud encryption is definitely the best solution.
Thanks, Bryan. Another question came through for Mark. I'm only a small dental office. Do I really need to worry about ransomware?
The unfortunate answer is absolutely, and it's really there's a couple of reasons for this. First of all, most ransomware payloads are indiscriminate. They are sent out en masse to large quantities of recipients, because the attackers don't necessarily care how big or small your company is. They just want to lock up your data and hope you pay. But when it comes to actual targeted attacks, small businesses, especially those in healthcare, like dentistries and small doctor's offices, are massive targets on their own for these types of attacks, because your patient data is critical to your company's existence. And attackers know this, so they go after you to get that data. And the other reason why this is such a huge issue for smaller offices is you typically don't have a well-trained IT staff like you would at a big hospital. You don't have the people with the technical knowledge in place to know how to prevent and respond to these attacks quickly on site. So it makes you a great target for the bad guys, unfortunately.
Absolutely. All right. Another question, Bryan, if you'll answer this one, it says, what is the cost to have the no obligation assessment done to evaluate your current status?
Thanks, Alan. Actually, and I'm sorry I failed to say that, but it's actually free. It's something that we send a local person in. We can also do it remotely, and we can provide that for you at no cost. And then again, there's no obligation after that. It's just, we'd like to give you that health report. Of course, we'll have some solutions, or even better for you, that, hey, you're well protected, everything looks great, and it's a health report that you can keep in your office if you ever want to refer to it, or maybe you have to show it to somebody for some reason. But again, it's no cost.
Awesome. And that goes along with this last question that I have. Where do I start, and how do I know if I'm vulnerable? Bryan, you want to just kind of go a little more into that?
Yeah. So if you want to get this done right now, you can call the 877-483-0382. That's for our TechCentral support department. And then also, Alan will be sending some more information out so you all receive that. Or go to hstechcentral.com/protectyourpractice. And that's where you can get the information as well as submit to get an assessment done.
Excellent. Thanks, Bryan. I also want to thank Mark and Bryan both for their awesome presentations and answering these questions. And thank you all for the great questions that you've been sending in. We've had quite a few come through. We haven't been able to get to all of them, so we'll go ahead and respond to the rest of them via email within the next day or so. So look for that. We appreciate you joining us for this webinar. You can also contact our team directly or to request information or the free assessment like Bryan mentioned. Again, if you haven't already filled out the survey on the right of your screen, please do so. This information helps us provide the right content and the right webinars for you guys in the future. And also, for those of you who have already requested more information or to receive a network assessment, we'll have someone reach out to you in the next couple of days. So again, I want to say thank you for joining us for this webinar, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.